So here's one question that I've always wondered. What is the difference between a cook and a chef?
That's a really great question. I think that you would get a different answer from different people.
Sure.
A really by the book answer that you might get in culinary school is that there is a culinary organization that gives certificates with different titles. So you could get an ACF certified sous chef certificate or an ACF certified chef certificate. When you graduate culinary school, you get an ACF certified cook certificate. Most people don't know that, and when I say most people, I mean chefs, restaurateurs. Like, unless you were in culinary school, it got brought up as like, by the way, you're going to get the certificate. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But if you were to interview with Disney, then they might pay for, or you might want to go and get a certificate to attach to your resume. It would be worth it if you had this very corporate pursuit. In the real world, it really means, one of the best definitions that I've heard is that you're not a chef until somebody voluntarily calls you a chef.
Okay.
And that's kind of a little bit more of a romantic way to think about it. That there were restaurants that I worked in, it was just the person that was in charge. They were hired as the chef de cuisine, would be a title that was familiar to me. There's restaurants where there's kitchen managers, there's restaurants where there are, they hold all kinds of different titles. And then there's restaurants where there's a chef, and you kind of know that, and they're the person in charge. It's obviously the most literal way to kind of describe it. I worked in fine dining restaurants, and as it's been kind of seen on television, there's a culture of cooks and chefs to call everybody chef, where it doesn't have anything to do with the hierarchy. It's a sign of respect, and it's a sign of inclusion, that you are part of the club, you are one of us. And in the highest restaurants, there is a chef de cuisine, there is an executive chef. That hierarchy still exists, but the name chef, you would say to the dishwasher, you would say to somebody that you would say to a purveyor that came in that you respected and that you liked, you would call them chef. So kind of obviously a very wide, sprawling definition of the word, but I like it that way.
So here's one of my favorite questions, being somebody who is a gardener, and I really I try to seek out the best ingredients to cook for myself. So as somebody who's cooking professionally, for events, and how important do you think having good ingredients is?
Yeah, it's obviously paramount. You can't get around it. It speaks for itself. The best chefs that I've ever worked for, and definitely my own pursuit, is to really let the ingredients speak for themselves, and that's the best way to make really good food. The best chefs can do so much with so little. They know how to highlight the best parts and tastes of the ingredients, and they harmonize with it. The bad ones are pulling things and trying to make things there that aren't, and that happens a lot with just working with crummy stuff.
Some of the restaurants that have inspired me the most are Michelin Star rated. But a lot of times when I go to kind of check them out over time, I see that they've closed their doors. How can a restaurant that's able to have such success still end up, permanently closing their doors? Do you have any insight on why you think that may be?
Definitely.
Yeah.
As being somebody that worked in that circle, I think the honest answer is that there are competing agendas. And the agendas are from the Michelin community, and to have a chef that wants to have a Michelin star, it really means that you're prioritizing the best ingredients, taking care of people, being hosts, and really good hospitality, really good at hospitality. And a lot of those priorities are not very lucrative, and they're expensive. So a lot of these places end up having to make choices that they don't want to make.
Yeah.
And we might end up getting into this conversation down the road, but it's a really big reason on why I decided to go into the shift of doing personal chef work was as a person that ran Michelin programs. The conversations that I was having with my bosses was just that we have to choose a lane. We can't straddle it. If we want to push and achieve these standards, then everybody has to know that we're going in that direction. If we want to prioritize profits, then we can do that, but I'm not your guy,
Right.
and you can do that.
Yeah.
And I think where the Michelin restaurants get in trouble is when they try to straddle that line. And I think a lot of them, that's why they don't make it. The group that I work for a really long time has closed a lot of their restaurants since COVID and lost their stars, and I'll never forget the owner being really relieved when the stars were gone.
Wow.
Because he could pursue his goals for the restaurant. He wasn't a bad guy, but they were his goals. And when we got a star, now his goals were shortchanged by a very specific direction in the creative department, which was the chef and some other people that were kind of in that lane. So I think that's when things get hung up.
Is there anybody that you would love to cook with that is something that really inspires you, or is there anybody that you have cooked with that you really admire in the chef world?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a guy that I worked for that I didn't get to spend a lot of time with, but I really respect, is Michael Carlson. He's the chef owner of the restaurant called Schwa, and he's so unapologetically sincere in his approach to what he does. And when you dine at that restaurant, you know exactly where you are and you know exactly what's going on. And in my opinion, a lot of Michelin experiences have to include a lot of smoke and mirrors. That's probably a harsh way to put it, but maybe some people would call it theater, which is maybe has more value to it. And there's no hiding there. The cooks are on the floor, serving, the only ones involved with your experience from front to back, from hanging your coat to checking you out at the end, washing the dishes, polishing your glassware, managing your wine. And the reason for that was he didn't want anything between his vision and what he knew the chefs working there to share and what ended up in front of the customers. So I really, really appreciated that. I would love to cook with Alice Waters, is a huge inspiration to me. She has really been, I guess you would call her kind of a steward of California cuisine. Her recipe writing and the way that she cooks is so poetic. She had a lot of her books, instead of kind of, you might see a recipe and a picture and maybe it might highlight an ingredient or a person or something. Her books and her recipes are John's birthday or Lucy and David's anniversary, and they are recipes and dinners and meals that were written for a time and a place. And that really resonates with what I do now as a host, as a personal chef, is I really want to create memories for people and have something for them to hold on to savor the moments that they have with each other. So she's a badass, and she's definitely on top of the list.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it first, Alice Waters, wherever you're at. That sounds really amazing, and I think that as somebody who does value sincerity and authenticity, it makes sense that being a private chef, like from my hands, and my heart to you, there's no smoke and mirrors. It's
Right.
really just about, and I love that it's about the time and the place, and it really kind of, it's a stamp on your heart, and it makes it real. It makes it human. Right?
100%.
What is the process like for putting together a menu? That's kind of a
Good
real
question.
big open question for you.
No, it's cool. I'll try to keep it as concise as I can.
Yeah.
The process for me is super fun. It's one of my favorite parts of what I do. I think that people are always shocked when they put in a request, whether they know of me or maybe it's a request I field online, and I not immediately, but I pick up the phone and I call them. So I operate on a very analog schedule that way, because I want to get an understanding of who they are, who we're celebrating, and I just ask questions. Some of them are just basic logistic questions about dates and times and how many people. But what I'm really trying to uncover is, what do you have in mind? And in that way, I can respond to a request and not try to force a program into one direction or another. And it's a lot like building a dish. Like I said, like, I want the culinary program for an event to fit perfectly into the space and the time and the guests that are there. So it just starts with a conversation. Where do you like to go out to eat? What would you order? Would you share this? Would you each get your own? And I just gather a little bit of a vibe about the hosts and maybe who we're celebrating or the group. And then as soon as I'm done with that conversation, I leave no time between that conversation and menu writing.
Yeah.
So I immediately start writing based on what I think would work really well for the occasion, what's worked well in the past, what ingredients I have seen and have sparked my interest, and that's it, really. That program changes all the time, so sometimes it's an 8-course tasting menu, sometimes it's a drop off and eat, and because that is what makes sense for you guys. So yeah, that's really it.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of hearing that, using all of the tools that you have a conversation with the person you're going to be cooking with, and you sort of take that impression and then just right away start to formulate based off of that impression.
Absolutely, because I want that conversation and that first impression to really guide. Mm-hmm. It sounds corny, but it's like, you're trying to make something from nothing. You know what I mean? When you're writing or being creative in any aspect, you have to have a why. Yeah. And if your why gets diluted into, because I have to write a menu, or because it's just what I have to do, whatever you're making, whether it's pottery or art or paintings or writing a book or anything, if you lose a connection with why you're doing it, it's going to be that much harder to get to the spot, so that's kind of how I do it.
What is it like now, having worked in the traditional hierarchy of, Michelin Star rated restaurants, now you're a personal chef. Is the entrepreneurial aspect of that, is that a challenge, or is it something that's kind of been able to form organically? Do you have anything that you could say about that aspect of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that people that have an entrepreneurial spirit, it's really hard to deny. Mm-hmm. I guess I wouldn't really know for certain, but I would guess that it's something that you either know that you have or you don't. Right. And I have always felt that tug. I think that's something that I may have gotten from my dad, that would have kind of crazy ideas and my mom would laugh at him, but in great support about, why don't we buy a farm, or what if we just got like 10 goats or like some chickens, or like just have some really kind of wacky ideas on what to do with life and just really have fun with it. And it was a huge part of what really felt natural about the shift. Earning a paycheck for yourself without somebody else's name on it is a whole new world. There is no way to deny it. It feels so energizing and scary and intense, and it's all good. It's not all good, it's scary, but it's a whole new world. It retunes your brain to think in a different way, and it's something that I think once most people have a taste of it, would be very difficult to go back to a more conventional arrangement. And I don't know that it's better or worse. I think that there's plenty of people, especially during COVID, I had lots of requests coming in. I tried, and I thought that, I'll just have all my friends take clients and we'll have this community of personal chefs and it'll be like a fairy tale. Yeah. And everybody that I called was like, you're crazy, I would never do that. Like, you're going to go into strangers' houses and you don't know like when you're going to get paid, or if you're going to get jobs, or they just would prefer to have a predictable working arrangement. Right. So it's been incredible. I absolutely love it. I think I drive my business partner crazy because I am constantly pitching new ideas with what to do next, and imagining what my life will look like, down the line. Because as fun as this work is, I can't probably do it very well when I'm 65. So, it's a really good way to daydream about, what other things I could do with my crafts and my passions that would be fun. And, there's a lot more opportunity once there isn't somebody else in the mix that you can't control.
Absolutely. And I hear that, cooking in itself is a creative task, but also building your future is a creative task.
Absolutely.
And that sounds like that's something that you're really fond of, and that's very cool to hear about.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of questions and scrutiny around what a chef is permissible to serve. And that's something that I don't take lightly. It's not a fear out of being canceled or judged. I really feel it's my business. I can do what I want, serve what I want. But I think that it's important to recognize when you're appropriating or profiting off of somebody else's culture in a way that could be misinterpreted. So in order to be respectful of that, I really stick to a French, Italian, and New American genre, and that in itself is pretty broad, and that's really because it was the focus of study. I studied that cuisine. I paid to study that cuisine. I had instructors from those regions. I love traveling and eating and learning from those folks, and if I ever do serve those dishes, I want to make sure that I'm representing that appropriately. And sometimes it's just citation, just citing, whether it's in a conversation or otherwise, that this is where I learned how to do this.
Right.
I don't necessarily have to do that when I'm on site serving French, Italian, or New American, because I went to culinary school, and that is the foundation of our curriculum. So for those reasons, that's kind of the avenue that I stick in when I'm making money. But if I'm cooking for my friends or my family, then I just pack as much flavor in as I can from all over the world, and use different techniques and ingredients, and absolutely just try to be curious, and it really guides a lot of my study, so to speak. I try not to do too much of that on the table for work. I kind of leave it at home. So that kind of keeps my hobby brain moving, but it's not really for sale.
Given me and my audience a lot to think about when it comes to who's really behind the scenes making our food, and sort of what goes into that process. From what I've heard, it's more than just the creative task of fire, salt, and pressure, but it's a multi-dimensional creative task. It's something that you maybe don't leave at work, but it just sort of permeates your entire life. So I really appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing great things to come from you. Is there any last things that you want to say in terms of any events that you have, or social media, or new frontiers, anything at all?
Yeah, sure. We've got actually a space coming together in Piatone that me and my partner are working on getting open. It's a completely new build out. It's a little too early to talk about specifically what we're going to do there. Essentially, we'll keep personal chef business, kind of have a nice sturdier home base for it, and then we'll have some other things going on with front of house space that'll have some kind of public component. But we'll keep you in the loop with it. Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep everybody in the loop. And if people want to find you, it's Chef Matthew Ryan Chicago. They could probably just run you in their Google search. Yeah, chefmatthewryan.com. Absolutely. Well, easy enough. So thank you again, and thank you for being here to cook us this delicious meal. Let's go ahead and get it going. Let's get it going. Cheers. Thank you.